The diner smelled of fried onions and stale coffee, the kind of place people passed by without giving a second thought. A bell jingled as the door opened, letting in the crisp autumn air, carrying with it a chill that seeped into the bones. At a corner booth by the window sat Emily. She was 14, petite, with long brown hair tucked behind one ear, and she wore a brace that supported her thin legs. Her wheelchair was old but well cared for, and she had a sketchbook on her lap, pencils scattered around. She came to the diner almost every Thursday after school, her way of finding quiet in the chaos of life. The diner's afternoon lull was broken by a trio of local kids, loud and brash, who had a reputation for making everyone feel small. They sauntered in, each wearing a smirk that spelled trouble. One of them, a tall boy with a crooked nose named Derek, spotted Emily. "Well, look who we have here," he sneered, leaning against the table next to her booth. "Little freak in the chair." Emily's fingers tightened around her pencil. She had learned to tune out most of the taunts, but this group thrived on cruelty. "Why don't you just disappear?" one of them whispered, but loud enough for her to hear. Before she could react, Derek slapped the side of her wheelchair, sending her sketchbook tumbling to the floor. The pencils scattered like tiny missiles. Emily blinked back tears, stunned, her body rigid with shock. "You got a problem, freak," he hissed. Emily wanted to say something sharp to defend herself, but the words died in her throat. Her hand trembled as she gathered her scattered pencils. She wished someone would step in, anyone. But the diner was empty, and the waitress was in the kitchen, humming, oblivious to the scene. The trio snickered, and with one last mocking glance they left, leaving behind a swirl of dust and humiliation. Emily sat there, her hand hovering over her sketchbook, trying to steady herself, wishing desperately that she could just vanish. Her eyes welled with tears she refused to let fall. It wasn't long before a loud rumble filled the parking lot. The diner windows rattled as motorcycles roared past. One by one, gleaming chrome bikes rolled to a stop outside. The group dismounted, helmets tucked under arms, leather jackets creaking with movement. They were the Devil's Horns, a local biker gang that was rumored to be dangerous, but they had a peculiar code. They defended the defenseless. Inside, the bell jingled again as they stepped in. The air shifted, conversation stopped. These were men built like brick walls, but there was a calmness in their eyes like storms waiting for a reason. The leader, a man named Marcus, scanned the room and immediately noticed Emily. He took in the slight frame, the trembling hands, and the fear that lingered like a shadow. "Everything okay here?" he asked, his voice low, a mix of steel and gentleness. Emily shook her head slightly, unable to speak. One of the bikers knelt beside her, picking up the fallen pencils and sketchbook. He smiled softly. "You okay, kid?" Before she could answer, Derek and his gang reappeared, thinking Emily was alone. They laughed as they stepped into the diner, only to freeze as the bikers turned their full attention toward them. The atmosphere thickened, every muscle in the room tense. Marcus didn't yell, didn't threat. He simply said, "You're not welcome here." And in that moment, it was clear that these bikers were not to be messed with. The boys, sensing the danger, muttered apologies and slunk out of the diner, their bravado extinguished by sheer presence and unspoken warning. Emily's hands shook as Marcus returned her sketchbook. "It's okay," he said. "You don't have to put up with that, not ever." For the first time that afternoon, Emily smiled. And though she didn't know it yet, this was the beginning of a lesson she would never forget about courage, justice, and the unexpected ways in which kindness can arrive. Emily sat at the corner booth, still clutching her sketchbook, trying to steady her trembling hands. The warmth of the hot chocolate the biker had given her seeped into her palms, but it did little to calm the racing of her heart. The diner, once empty and quiet, now felt charged with an unspoken tension, the kind that made even the hum of the refrigerator seem louder. Marcus and his men had taken a booth across from her, casual in posture but alert in every sense. Their presence alone seemed to have reset the energy in the diner. Emily watched as they scanned the room with sharp, calculating eyes, the way hunters observe a forest before a storm. There was safety in them, yet an edge, a silent warning that nothing would be tolerated here. Why did you help me?" Emily asked softly, breaking the heavy silence. Her voice barely rose above a whisper, but Marcus heard her. He leaned back in his chair, one boot resting on the edge of the booth. "Because nobody deserves to be treated like that," he said calmly. "And because sometimes doing the right thing isn't about being brave. It's about being willing to act when others won't." Emily blinked, trying to absorb his words. She had spent so long feeling invisible, ignored, even forgotten by the world. And now here were these men, strangers, giving her a sense of safety she had never known. One of the bikers, a younger man with a kind, open face, leaned forward and nudged her sketchbook gently. "You're talented," he said, smiling. "Keep drawing. It matters more than you think." Emily looked down at the pages, the sketches of trees, city streets, and imagined heroes. I just like to make things real on paper," she said quietly. "Things that matter, things that feel alive." The biker nodded. "Good, that's the kind of thing the world needs. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's quiet like this." He tapped the sketchbook lightly, and Emily felt a warmth in her chest she hadn't felt in months. As she was starting to relax, the bell above the door jingled again. Emily's heart leapt. Had the bullies returned? A man walked in, flanked by two teenagers casting glances around the diner. They whispered to each other, their eyes landing on Emily. Her stomach tightened. Marcus leaned forward, his voice low but firm. "Stay calm," he murmured, almost to himself. The bikers shifted slightly, an unspoken readiness that filled the room with palpable tension. The newcomers hesitated, sensing the authority of the bikers. One teenager muttered, "She's just a girl," but the words seemed to falter in the presence of Marcus's calm, commanding gaze. After a long, tense pause, they turned and left, defeated by the silent, unyielding power of the bikers. Emily exhaled slowly, her body sagging with relief. "Do you always do this?" she asked. Marcus shook his head. "No, we don't look for trouble, but we don't walk away from it either. Sometimes that's all people need, a reminder that they're not alone." The afternoon sun dipped lower, shadows stretching across the worn diner floor. Emily's eyes wandered to the bikers again, and she noticed the subtle kindness in their eyes, the way they carried themselves with strength and purpose. One of them leaned toward her. "You ever feel like the world's too big, too cruel?" he asked. Emily nodded silently. "Art can help," he continued. "It gives you a voice when the world tries to silence you. And courage isn't about fighting everyone. It's about standing up when it matters, even in small ways." Emily thought of the bullies, of the fear she had felt. She realized that courage could come in many forms, drawing, speaking, even asking for help. And today she had seen it firsthand. Marcus stood, brushing dust from his jacket. "We have to go," he said, but his gaze lingered on Emily. "Remember this, never let anyone make you feel small, not ever." Emily nodded, the weight in her chest lightening. She felt something shift inside her, a newfound sense of hope, courage, and belonging. As the bikers mounted their motorcycles, the roar of the engines filled the parking lot, a sound that no longer intimidated but reassured. Emily pressed her hands to the window, watching them ride away. In that moment, she knew the world could be harsh, unpredictable, even cruel. But there were moments of kindness, of bravery, and of protection waiting, often in the most unexpected forms. For Emily, today was more than an afternoon at a diner. It was a turning point, a lesson in courage, a reminder that allies could appear when you least expected, and that sometimes standing up wasn't about strength alone, but about recognizing the goodness in the world and letting it guide you forward. The diner was quieter than usual that Friday afternoon. The air still smelled faintly of coffee and fried food, but the buzz of life had returned to its normal rhythm. Emily sat at her corner booth, sketchbook open, pencils neatly arranged, a ritual that brought her comfort and control after the chaos of the previous week. But peace is often fragile, and Emily had learned that lessons of courage rarely come without challenge. She was lost in drawing the trees outside the window when the bell above the door jingled, sharper than before. She glanced up, and her stomach tightened. The Bullies, the same trio who had humiliated her days ago, stepped inside. Derek, with his crooked nose and cruel smirk, led them, and his eyes landed on Emily immediately. "Well, look who's still sitting here," Derek sneered. His friends laughed behind him, and the air shifted instantly. Emily's hands trembled, but she forced herself to sit upright, gripping her sketchbook as if it were armor. "Hey," Derek mocked, "thought you'd hide from us forever. Guess some freaks never learn." Emily swallowed hard. The previous encounter had left her shaken, but today was different. She had tasted courage, had seen the power of allies, and felt the protective shadow of the bikers that lingered in her mind. "I'm not afraid of you," Emily said softly, surprising even herself. Derek laughed. "Cute," he said, stepping closer, "but words won't save you." The diner seemed to hold its breath. Emily's eyes flicked toward the door, half wishing Marcus and his men would appear again. And as if on cue, the roar of motorcycles echoed from the parking lot. Heads turned, and even Derek froze mid-step. The Devil's horns had returned. Marcus dismounted first, his leather jacket gleaming under the afternoon sun. His eyes scanned the diner, landing on Emily, calm yet commanding. Behind him, his men followed, their presence a wall of strength and authority. "Back again," Marcus said, voice low and steady, almost casual, but every word carried the weight of warning. Derek and his gang glanced at each other nervously. The laughter died in their throats. For the first time, the smug confidence they had wielded like a weapon seemed to crumble. "Stay out of this," Derek muttered, trying to salvage some pride. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes piercing. "No, you're not welcome here," he said, simple and final. The air in the diner thickened with tension. It was a silent command, and Derek understood it perfectly. The trio backed toward the exit, muttering curses under their breath. Emily felt a strange sense of triumph swell inside her, not because the bikers had scared them off, but because she had been brave enough to stand her ground. Marcus walked over to her booth, crouching slightly to meet her eyes. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. "You don't have to face them alone." Emily nodded, a lump in her throat. I think so," she whispered. "Thank you for coming back." "You don't need to thank us," Marcus said. "You've got more courage than you know. Today you proved it." Emily looked down at her sketchbook, running her fingers across the worn pages. She thought of the drawings she had made, the heroes she had imagined, the battles she had created on paper. Today, she realized, she had lived a moment as heroic as any she had drawn. The bikers stayed for a while, sipping coffee, chatting quietly, always keeping a protective watch over Emily. Their presence was steady, a reassurance that courage came in many forms, some quiet, some loud, some in the roar of engines, others in the simple act of standing firm. Hours passed, and the diner slowly emptied. The bullies were gone for good, or at least for now. Emily felt a new strength settling in her chest, a certainty that she could face the world with courage, kindness, and intelligence. Before leaving, Marcus knelt beside her chair, resting a hand lightly on her shoulder. "Remember this," he said. "Life will throw people at you who want to see you small, but you don't give them that power. Not ever." Emily nodded, tears threatening to spill, not from fear but from a mix of gratitude and empowerment. "I won't," she promised. Outside, the bikers mounted their motorcycles, engines roaring to life in a chorus of strength and solidarity. Emily pressed her hands to the glass, watching them ride away, and for the first time she didn't feel small. She felt part of something bigger, a world where courage, loyalty, and protection existed, and where standing up could change everything. That night back in her room, Emily opened her sketchbook. She drew the scene from the diner, herself at the corner booth, the bikers standing tall, Derek frozen with fear. She drew the motorcycles, the chrome glinting and the sunlight catching the leather jackets. But most importantly, she drew herself smiling, confident, strong. The picture wasn't just art. It was a declaration, a reminder that she had survived, that she had courage, and that kindness sometimes arrives on roaring engines and rough hands, but always with a heart capable of protection. Weeks passed. Emily continued to visit the diner every Thursday, but now she was no longer alone in spirit. The bikers would occasionally stop by, nodding to her from across the room, reminders that the world held unexpected allies. And whenever she felt the shadows of fear creeping back, she would touch her sketchbook and remember that afternoon, the moment she had learned the true meaning of courage. The bullies never returned. The town whispered of the bikers' presence, of the way they protected the defenseless, and Emily became a quiet symbol of resilience. Not because she was fearless, she was still human, but because she had faced cruelty, received help, and transformed that fear into strength. Years later, Emily would look back on that diner, the scattered pencils, and the men on motorcycles with gratitude. She would remember the smell of coffee, the hum of engines, and the lesson that courage can appear in the strangest forms. That the world, though unpredictable and often harsh, could be a place of profound kindness if one dared to stand tall, even in the smallest moments. And so, a girl once underestimated, a group of bikers once feared, and a diner once quiet became a story of bravery, of justice, and of unexpected friendship, a story that Emily would carry in her heart forever.